Okie doke. So we are continuing in the book of Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy. This week's Torah portion is called Parshat Ki Seitzei. So just a quick recap, this book of Deuteronomy, known as the Mishnah Torah, is Moses' recounting to the Jewish people as they're on the edge of going into the land of Israel, telling them what they need to know, telling them how to create a society in the land of Israel where it's not going to look like it did all along when they were in the desert, being taken care of by Moses, by Aaron, by Miriam, by God. There was this overt miracles of the manna and the water and the Mishkan and the tabernacle with God's presence right there. They're going to move into a more physical existence where they'll have to sow the seeds and reap the harvest and grow the crops and set up their institutions of law, of the judges we talked about last week in Shoftim, the judges and the police officers and the king and the different structures that were going to be there. And what we read in this week's Torah portion in Parshat Ki Seitzei is really the bedrock of who we are as Jewish people, how to be Jewish people, how to be a person in relationship to other people and in relationship to God. And outside of the big structures, the national structures of the court system and the judges, etc., there's how we operate individually in between each other. What does that look like? So we have in last week's Torah portion the people who are allowed to go to war, the people who are allowed to come in when we go into the land of Israel, who's going to be able to fight that holy war, to conquer the land, to take it over. And it says in last week's Torah portion that God's going to help us win that battle, and it has to be people who are resolute and people who are not distracted, people who are not scared, people who have faith and don't fear, and people who are going to be able to accomplish what God's going to help us to accomplish. And we continue that theme of war as we enter into this week's Torah portion. So this week's Torah portion is called Ki Seitzei. So I'll read you the first couple of sentences in this week's Torah portion. When you will go out to war against your enemies, Shem your God will deliver them into your hands, and you will capture its captivity. So very interestingly, so is this a real war? Is this like actually fighting our enemies? And say some of our commentators, and this is where I want to go with this conversation, is to go along the lines of what our commentators say, that this is a war of the self. This is us battling with ourselves. And we spoke about this last week, or last time when we spoke about in Parshat Re'eh, with the choice that we have to choose good over bad, to choose to do the right thing or to choose to turn ourselves away and not do the right thing. And in this week's Torah portion, Moses is telling the Jewish people, when you fight that war, when you're trying to battle against your inner self, who's going to war? Your soul is warring against your physicality. I have a really lovely saying where it says that who's going to war? We're going to war with our own selves. There's a battle between the soul and our bodies. When the soul goes out of its heavenly setting into the body to fight a war between the material and the spiritual, and never lose sight of the fact that every obstacle is surmountable. We have the capacity to do it. God says it will help us. If we want to win the battle against our lower selves and rise ourselves to our higher selves, then God will help us. And we read all of these Torah portions, and right now we're in the month of Elul, and this is the month as we're coming closer to Rosh Hashanah, and we have the work to do to self-reflect, to introspect, to work on ourselves and have a vision of what it is that we want to be. I heard a lovely little snippet, is on aish.com by Rabbi Sitner, who speaks about how to move ourselves along in the right direction. And he says, instead of focusing on the things that we are not, right? I'm not very good at this, I'm not very good at that. Let's focus on the things we are good at. Let's say, I am a loving person, and I could be more loving, or I am a good mother, but I could be a better mother. I am a good friend, but I could be a better friend. And take what we're good at and have a vision of where we can go with that, and build on what we have already, instead of knocking ourselves down like I'm not good at that, and go and focus on the negative. Maybe in order to push ourselves along and in order to feel empowered that we can really seize the moment is to think about the things that we're good at and say, I'm loving, I'm sweet, I'm able to manifest my giving nature in this way, and maybe I can do a little bit more. Maybe I can give a little bit more. Maybe I can love a little bit more. But I'm on the right path, and that way of thinking is very empowering. So just as a sidebar comment, I'm part of an organization called CORE, and we have a booklet for the 40 days that take us from the beginning of Elul until Yom Kippur. There's 40 days between the first day of Elul. We're now, I think, on the 5th day of Elul, 5th or 6th day of Elul. So we're still in the beginning, taking us and giving us fun or interesting ways to reflect on ourselves and how we can improve ourselves, how can we work on ourselves, what can we think about in terms of our relationship to ourselves, to each other, and to God. And then if you take, it's called the 40-Day Elul Project. If you're interested in it, please be in touch with me and I'll send you a copy. It's free and you can download it and you can do it at your own pace. You can do it in a group, whatever you want. But it's very powerful because it has us focusing. It's like real. Like we can read this and say, oh, isn't this very interesting? Or we can say, this is my guidebook. And it was the guidebook for the Jewish people when Moses was speaking to them and saying, all right, well, you're on the cusp of going into the land of Israel, and this is what you have to know, and this is how you're going to be a good person, this is how you're going to take care of each other, and this is how you're going to be kind and respectful and be mindful of other people, and how you're going to listen, and what kind of relationships you're going to have with other people. And you can say, well, that was contextualized back to the time when the Jewish people were going into the land of Israel. Yes, and it's us today. It's a timeless document. It's a timeless guidebook. And we can take advantage of those lessons today through the 40-Day Project, through our own reflections, through learning Torah. So here, as we go through this Parshat Ki Seitzei, in this Torah portion, there are 74 mitzvot. So 74 mitzvot, it has the most mitzvot of any Torah portion in any of the Torah. So it's jam-packed with mitzvahs. And it's all over the place, and might seem to be all over the place. It has a lot of laws about how to be in relationship to other people, how to be in relationship to ourselves. And it's teaching us how to refine ourselves, how to act in a way that not only are we good people and kind people and not cruel people, but also that we're doing this in relationship to the divine, into the relationship to our Creator, in relationship to the King of the universe, in relationship to the source of everything, of everything, that we're gifted this time period to recreate ourselves. When we get to Rosh Hashanah is day 6 of creation. Rosh Hashanah was the day that mankind was created, that Adam and Eve were created on the 6th day, which was Rosh Hashanah, right? So the beginning of the world happened 6 days earlier. Rosh Hashanah is the day that Adam was created. And this period that's leading up to Rosh Hashanah is a period of rebirth. We have the potential to rebirth ourselves. Written into the fabric of the universe is a concept called teshuvah, of returning, going back to our beginning. So when we stand tall, hopefully, on Rosh Hashanah, having done some preparation, having thought about ourselves a little bit, and we can have a vision of what we want to be, and we can stand there and we can have a vision of what we want to be, and have a higher vision. Maybe it's a bar we'll never reach, but it's a bar that we can aim for and that we should be aiming for, because as God tells us at the beginning of this week's Torah portion, if you don't try, if you don't put your effort in, then there's nothing to work with. But if you buy the lottery ticket, God can help you win the lottery, right? You have to buy one ticket to win the lottery. You're not going to win it sitting at home waiting for the lottery ticket to fall from heaven. You have to go buy a ticket if you want to win. So if we want to be better, we have to put some effort in, and then God will help us. And that's what he's telling us in this week's Torah portion, amongst other things. One way of interpreting this first sentence in the Torah, in this parsha, is when we go to war, when we fight ourselves, when we have this desire to turn away, when we have this desire to sit at home and not do anything, and I can't be bothered, and so let's put a little bit of passion in there. Let's motivate ourselves. Let's reach out however we can reach out, and start that slow baby steps of moving ourselves forward. And the more we move ourselves forward, the more we'll go, the more we'll go in that trajectory, and God will help us. So God's telling us He will help us in that battle against our lower selves. God will help us. So this week's Torah portion really, as I mentioned, 74 mitzvahs. And what's a mitzvah? A mitzvah is colloquially translated as a commandment, but I would suggest that another way really to think about it is it's a connection. It's a connector. When we're in partnership, which we're taught we are with God, that God created the universe, God created mankind. Why? To shower us with goodness, to shower us with love, to shower us with light, for our benefit were we created. God wanted to give us all the blessings, all the light, all the love that He has to give. And we want to be the receptacle for that. So how do we receive that? By plugging ourselves in, and plugging ourselves in through the mitzvahs. So let's just delve into some of these mitzvahs and see where they take us. So one of them, which I really want to talk about because I think this is an amazing, amazing mitzvah, is, maybe I'll read it inside, and then we can take it there. It's about shooing away the mother bird. So it says that if a bird's nest happens to be before you on the road, on any tree or on the ground, young birds or eggs, and the mother is roosting on the young birds or the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely send away the mother and take the young for yourself, so that it will be good for you and prolong your days. So two things here. One is, you want the eggs. Let's say you want the eggs, and it says you'll come upon this nest, and every single commentator on this text says it's not happenstance. There isn't such a thing as happenstance. Everything has a God involvement. So you're walking down the road, and there's a nest in the tree, on the ground, and there's a mother bird protecting her babies, protecting her little fledglings, protecting her eggs. And you have, according to the Torah, you can take those eggs if you want. But if you do that, you have to shoo away the mother bird first. You have to really, and what our commentators teach us is that when you shoo away the mother bird, what you're doing is not allowing the mother bird see you take her eggs. So you're kind to the mother bird because you're aware that there's pain going to be caused to the mother bird of you taking her eggs. So your capacity to take the eggs is not what's being questioned here, but it's your cognizant of the suffering that the mother bird will have. So you shoo her away so she doesn't see you take the eggs. That's one way of looking at it. And you don't take the mother and the eggs at the same time, because that would be almost like eliminating the species. So we don't want to do that. So we shoo away the mother bird if we want to take the eggs. So the mother doesn't see you take the eggs. There isn't the pain of seeing you taking her eggs. That's one way of looking at it. But I'd like to suggest, if we go back to the beginning of what it says you can't take the mother. You shall not take the mother with the young. You can't take the mother bird. If you're walking down the street and you see a bird at the side of the street, there's no way you're going to be able to catch that bird. That bird will fly away and you cannot catch that bird. However, if the bird is on a nest and is protecting her young, what she's doing is she is exhibiting an inborn maternal instinct to take care of her young, as do we. We have a very powerful parental desire, instinct to warrior protect our offspring. That's kind of built in. It's instinctual, it's natural, it's how we're made. So you might be able to take the mother bird because she's not going to leave her babies behind. She's going to stay next to her babies. Her maternal instinct isn't to fly away and disappear. She's going to try to protect her babies. So that would allow you, her maternal instinct and her desire to protect her eggs will allow you to take her. You could capture her by using her maternal instinct against her. And that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to use her maternal instinct against her. which is amazing to think about. Like we think, well, they're just animals, but no, 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 no. God's saying, Moses is saying, we're learning, we have to be compassionate people. We have to be people who are not cruel. We have to be people who are not going to disregard the feelings of a mother bird. We're going to be aware of the feelings of the mother bird. We're going to feel the feelings of the mother bird, and we're not going to take her and use her maternal instinct against her. And the reward of that is length of days. It will prolong your days. The only other time where we are rewarded, we're told the reward for a mitzvah, with this reward of long days, of longevity of days, of longness of days, is the mitzvah of the connector of honoring our parents. So here the reward of shooing away the mother bird and not taking the mother bird with her eggs is that it will be good for you, and your days will be long. Same reward is given for us honoring our parents. So honoring our parents is really, really, really hard. Shooing away the mother bird isn't so hard, but we're told that the reward, quote unquote, the reward is length of days. In the next world, not in this world, in the next world, whatever that means, that we'll have a higher place in the world of souls. But in our reward in the next world will be length of days. Again, we don't really know what that means. However, we don't want to fall into the trap of saying, oh, well, this mitzvah, this connector, the reward's given, so I'm going to make sure I do this. This is a really important one, and the other ones aren't so important. So it's a very basic Jewish concept that we actually don't know the reward. We don't know like the reward for what's a big mitzvah and what's a little mitzvah. And we talked about this when we were in the Parshat Eikev, where there might be mitzvahs that we think are low, they're little mitzvahs, and so we don't pay attention to them, and we have in our minds the ones that are really important. But the underlying principle that I want to convey, that's brought out through our commentators and through our Torah tradition, is that we don't really know what the rewards are. If we did know the rewards, then we would only do the quote unquote the important ones. There's a parable given about a king who wants to plant a garden. And he tells the workers that if you plant rose bushes, I'll give you, he doesn't tell them what he's going to give them for different plants and flowers and bushes and so on, that he doesn't tell them what they'll get paid. And so they plant a beautiful garden with an array of flowers, an array of bushes, etc. And it's a beautiful garden. If he were to say to them, well, the rose bushes are worth more than the dandelions, and nobody's going to plant a dandelion. And that's not what God wants of us, right? God is saying, if you want that light, you want that love, you want that everything to be showered down, you got to do the whole thing. You got to work on all of it, the little ones and the big ones and whatever. You don't know what's little and you don't know what's big. And shooing away the mother bird is going to give you length of days, but it doesn't mean it's more important than any other mitzvah, right? And again, 74 mitzvahs in this week Torah portion. Another one of which, and again, I love this idea of sanctifying the parental instinct to protect our young. We have that, it's inbred, it's inborn, and it's holy and it's real. And maybe it goes the other way, like our parents feel that for us. Do we ever think about that? Do we ever turn it around and say, the way in which your parents have sacrificed for us and have given for us might not be, hopefully they have, and we're cognizant of that, as much as they gave us life, which is we should be grateful for, but also that they sacrificed for us. They gave us, not just life, but they gave us, our upbringing and they sacrificed for us, and they did whatever, expound upon that at your leisure. But the gratitude that we have for that, then and we're commanded to honor our parents. So it's easier for the parent to love the child than it is for the child to honor the parents, right? So it's commanded for us to do that, to take care of our parents. For some people it's easier, for other people it's harder, but it's written into the Torah. It might be a very hard thing for some people to take care of their parents, but it's mandated and it's in the Torah, as is this mitzvah of shooing away the mother bird and not taking the mother with her egg. So let's recognize this instinct. Let's recognize this desire, this warrior energy we have to take care of our young. Another mitzvah, another situation that's discussed in this week's Torah portion is the wayward and rebellious son. So there's a father and a mother, and they have a child, and this child is rebellious. This child isn't listening. This child is drinking. This child is gluttonous, and the parents don't know what to do. The child is not listening to the parents, and this child is considered to be of age. He's over the age of bar mitzvah. He's 13, and he has to be a specific age, and he has to be it's very, very, very specific, the rules around this wayward and rebellious son. So I'll read it to you. If a man will have a wayward and rebellious son who does not listen to the voice of the father and the voice of his mother, meaning the voice of the father and the mother have to be exactly the same, and the parents discipline him, but he does not hearken to them, then his father and his mother shall grasp him and take him to the elders of the city and the gates of his place. Meaning that they don't know what to do with this son. They don't know how to help him and put him on the straight and narrow, and they love him so much, and they want him to be good, but he's not listening. And it goes on to then describe what's done to this child. However, our tradition teaches us that there was never such a case as this. It was such an impossible number of different criterion that needed to be met in order to have such a child, that no one ever was this. No one was ever this. However, we learn it. We learn it because perhaps there's something to learn from it. And what is it? Is that we have to listen. We have to learn how to listen. This rebellious and wayward son wasn't listening, and we have to learn how to listen. We have to learn how to pull ourselves out. This wayward and rebellious son is considered to be the ultimate in arrogance and self-centeredness. So self-centered and so arrogant, can't hear anything, and is going to grow up to be like that. And so the message is don't be like that. Don't somehow, however we do that in our parenting, do we have to have parents that have the same voice? There has to be consistency in our parenting. There has to be love. There has to be us listening to our children as much as they listen to us. And we can get a lot of parenting advice from listening to this wayward and rebellious son who's reached the age of 13, the maturity in the Jewish context of adulthood, so to speak. But he's grown up not listening. And what can we do to not have that with our children? I remember one of my children, he was going to go to a certain camp and whatever, and we said, well, we want you to, whatever it was that we asked him to do, it was not something that he necessarily thought was important for him to do. And we said, we really want you to do this thing. I don't want to go into it. And he said, well, I'll do it. And I said, well, it's really nice of you to do that, but why are you doing it? And he said, because you told me to. And I trust you. I trust you. I trust that you have my best interest in mind. And I might not understand it, but I'm listening to you, and I'm allowing you to make this decision for me, even though I might not have arrived at this decision on my own. So I think that's a paradigm. Like, wouldn't that be lovely if it was always the case that our children listen to us, or that we have the capacity to listen to each other? But what it is, I think, it's about bringing out the ego, pulling the ego back, pulling the arrogance back, and having the capacity to listen. And go back to the shuang way, the mother bird, and the mitzvah to take care of our parents and look after our parents and honor our parents. What we have is, it's not about me. It's about the bigger picture. It's about taking care of each other. It's about looking after each other. What else do we learn in this week's Torah portion? We learn that if there's a lost object, we have to return a lost object. A lost object. You find something on the street, you have to try to return it. I mean, obviously, if it's a penny, you don't have to find who the owner of the penny is. But if you found something, there was an amazing story of a rabbi I think he was in New Haven, Connecticut, a number of years ago. But it's a very powerful story. He bought a desk from an old lady, and she was moving into a nursing home. I don't remember the whole story, but he bought this desk, and he had to take the desk apart in order to take it into his house. As he's taking it apart, he finds in the back, in a drawer, like in the way back, in the whatever he had to take apart, he took it apart, and he found the bag in the back, and in the bag was $10,000 in cash. and I guess she had lost it, or she'd forgotten about it, or whatever. And he found this $10,000, but he had bought the desk. He hadn't, and so he returned the money to the lady, and it was a big deal, and it was all over the newspapers. But this is our mitzvah. This is our mitzvah of returning a lost object. She lost it. He was buying the table or the desk. He wasn't, there's a story in the oral tradition of a man who buys a donkey. And he buys this donkey, and in the saddle of the donkey he finds a diamond or some very precious jewel, and he returns it to the owner. And the owner is absolutely flabbergasted. Like, how is it possible that you returned this jewel? And he said, well, I didn't buy the jewel, I bought the donkey. And the man responds with a Baruch Hashem, like it's a testament to you who returned this gem, that you have a higher power, that you have something else guiding you. It's not your arrogance, it's not your greed, it's not your desire for money, that you have something higher that is ruling over you, that is the driving force behind what you do. And so he's, blesses the God of this man who returns this gem to him. But on some level, that's what we're trying to do all the time. We're trying to raise ourselves up, right? When you go out to war, Ki Seitzei, when you go out to war and you're trying to battle against, oh, I want to keep the gem, I want to keep the $10,000. No, there's something higher than that, and that's called honesty, and that's called returning a lost object, and I have to return this lost object. Another mitzvah in this portion, which kind of is a sequitur to that, is if you pass by and you see your friend and the donkey is weighed down with a big load. No, I think it's he's loading up. I think that the friend is loading up his donkey, and so as you pass by, you have to help him load up his donkey. You have to help him. But if there were two people there, if there was let's see, you have to unload the donkey, right? You have to unload the donkey, sorry. But if you're walking down and you see your enemy, let's say you have an enemy, and you're walking down the street and your enemy is loading up his donkey, and you see your friend, your best friend, or somebody who you're very close with, somebody you really love, is unloading their donkey. And so you have two people to help. Who do you help? And the Torah is telling us, the oral tradition teaches us, that you have to help your enemy first. You have to help the person that you have issues with. You have to help that person. It's a very powerful concept, because your inclination is to kind of like, oh, I didn't really see that person. I really want to go help my friend, because then, we'll have a nice time together and they'll be so grateful to me, etc. But the Torah is saying, no, fight that desire to go help your friend and go help the person you have issues with. Why? Because that's the right thing to do, number one. But when you give, this concept of love, that to come to love someone is to give to them. That the root of the word love, ahava, the root is to give. So as we give, and maybe that's why parents love their children perhaps more than their children love their parents, is because certainly in the early days, parents are giving more and more and more and more to the children than the children are giving to the parents. So as we give and as we continue to pour in goodness to our children, we love them because they're so connected to us. And again, let's think about that in the God-humanity paradigm. It's the same thing. Like if you think the whole world is being recreated every second by God, by the source of everything, the energy and the light and the sun and nature and the moon and our lives, and everything's kept going by God every second, every moment. It's all happening. God is showering the world all the time with goodness, and loves us unconditionally, It takes us back to the concept of Elul, this month we're in, where we understand that God is super close, and all we need to do is turn. All we need to do is turn towards God and connect. And he's closest to us in this month of Elul, and if we want it, if we turn towards it, then it's there to be had. That relationship is there. We have to open ourselves up. We have to crack open all the things that shield us and block us, and our arrogance and our jealousies and our angers and all of these things. Try to work on all of that to open our heart up to have that relationship and to enter into the closeness that is potential to have in this month. So when we give to other people, we're developing a relationship of love. And so the person we have issues with, is all the more the person we should be giving to, even though we don't want to. Actually, it's a good thing to think about. Like I have something, let's say, I like to make lots of extra challah. If I make lots of extra challah, like, who am I going to give it to? My inclination is to give it to my friends, but maybe I should, seek out, I shouldn't say this publicly, and then whoever's going to get challah this week is going to think that I have issues with them. But the point is that if I give to people, if we give to people that we have issues with, it brings us into a relationship. They become part of our sphere. They become people that we can learn to love. I mean, when I not become best friends with them, but it changes the dynamic. It changes it from avoidance and negativity, and I don't want anything to do with that person. And it starts the turn. It starts the face-to-faceness if I'm giving. So as we walk by somebody who needs help, the person who is easy to give help to is our friend. The person who's hard to give help to is our enemy, is the person we have issues with. The Torah is telling us, help the person you have issues with, because it'll bring you to a place of love. So this particular commandment is commanded earlier in the Torah, where it says that you should help your enemy. In this week's Torah portion, it says you should help your friend. Well, what happened to the way it was written in the previous Torah reading, where it says it was helping your enemy? Well, the idea is that now it's your friend, because back then, when you learnt the mitzvah, you're giving to the person you have issues with, or you have, negative feelings towards, and through giving, they've now become your friend. So in this week's Torah portion, we've graduated. We've gone from the person who we had issues with to they become part of our orbit. They become our friend. They become our brother. They become somebody that we see in our orbit of somebody we want to help. So it's an amazing idea. Okay, so what we're learning, so two things in that one is loving our neighbor, loving a person, and being cognizant of the donkey. So in this particular case, in this week's Torah portion, it says you should unload the donkey. So again, we're going to take care of our animals. We're going to shoo away the mother bird, because we're aware that the mother bird has feelings and has a maternal instinct over her fledglings. We're going to unload the donkey, because the donkey needs to be unloaded, because it's like under this heavy weight. We're going to unload the donkey. And also in this week's Torah portion, it teaches us a few other things about animals. One of them is you don't muzzle an animal, an ox, when it is threshing your grain, when it's treading in the field, right? Because it's cruel. Like, there's food around, and the ox needs to reach down and eat some of that food. And if you muzzle and say, no, you can't eat anything, it's cruel to the animal. Don't be cruel to the animal. Don't muzzle your animal when they're helping you, when they're, treading the grain or whatever they're doing. Don't do that. And it says that in this week's Torah portion. It also tells you not to put the ox and the donkey together in the same plow. Why? Because the donkey isn't as strong as the ox, and it's not fair to the donkey. The donkey can't keep up with the ox. So don't put these animals together, because they don't belong together. And it's cruel to the donkey. So we're told to do things that we might not come to on our own, but we're learning not just, okay, I have to follow this rule, but we're learning how to be compassionate people. We're learning how to be kind. We're learning how to not be cruel. And we might not think of it on our own. So the Torah is going to tell us, don't muzzle your ox. Don't put the donkey with the ox in the plow. Shoo away the mother bird. And we learned previous Torah portion, don't kill a mother and a baby on the same day. Don't kill a cow and its calf on the same day, because that's cruel. And it's also teaching us not to be cruel. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk is the source for not eating meat and milk together, right? So, and that again is not, I'm not telling you the reason. We don't know the reason. Let's go back to that. We're not doing it for the reward, number one, and we're not doing it because we know the reason why we're doing things, because if we did, then we wouldn't do them anymore, because we say, well, that doesn't apply to me. We talked about that last week with Shoftim. But, however, there is something to what it does to us. It teaches us to be compassionate, to be kind. So when we separate meat from milk, which is the nutrient of sustenance for babies and its life and its nurturing so don't eat a meat that you've killed this animal, and this animal that's giving birth and having milk. Don't don't eat them together. And I'm not saying this is reason, but perhaps one of the things that we gain from being aware of that is learning how to be compassionate and learning how to be kind and learning how to not be cruel, and to say the milk doesn't belong with the meat, because the meat, there's concession to eat animals, which we have, and we slaughter an animal, but the milk that's about life and about nurturing and about the next generation, and don't eat it with the dead meat that you're allowed to eat. So don't do that, because that's going to affect you spiritually. We learn many things in this week's Torah portion about mixtures. So as I mentioned, don't muzzle the ox and the donkey together. We also have other things that we don't mix together. We don't mix certain trees together, not allowed to be grown together. We don't mix seeds. We don't mix certain fabrics together. We don't mix wool and linen. We don't put those two together. They're things, and it's right in the Torah. Don't do that. And again, it's all these. You could say, oh, that's so nitty picky, and it's little, and who cares? But this is in the Torah, and this is God. This is your guidebook. If you want the light to come in, if you want it, then do these things. Like, we might not understand them, and we don't understand them. And if we do understand them, we don't understand them. So the guidebook is with the channels, with the ways to turn on the tap and bring the light and the goodness and the love in. Don't mix these things together. Respect biodiversity and the boundaries between species. The boundaries between species. And in this week's Torah portion, we're also taught that a man shouldn't wear women's clothing and a woman shouldn't wear men's clothing. That we have to separate. There has to be a distinction between the genders. There has to be a distinction between lots of things. And one of the things we also learn is you should put a boundary, you should put a fence on the parapet of your house. If you're building a house, or you inherit a house, or you have a house, your roofs, your stairwells, your landings have to have fences. They have to have boundaries, because you have to be careful. Like like somebody might fall off and die, or somebody might, it's a liability. It's negligent. And last week we talked about the cities of sanctuary that you can run to if you accidentally, by your negligence, cause the death of somebody. So the story in last week's Torah portion is if somebody's out chopping down wood in a forest and they have an axe and they didn't check that the top of the axe, that the metal part of the axe, I'm not quite sure what it is, the head of the axe isn't secure in the handle, and the person goes to chop down wood and the head of the axe flies off as you're going back with the axe, it flies off and hits someone on the head and kills them, right? You didn't mean to kill them, but it's your negligence that caused that person to die. You're not liable for the death penalty, but you're not scot-free. You don't get nothing. You had there was some aspect of your involvement in the death of this person, your negligence. So you are given a city of refuge to run away to. We talked about it last week. And you can run to that city of refuge. And this is another example where the Torah is telling us, like, here's something you have to be careful about. You have to be careful to have a boundary on your roof so people don't fall off your roof or fall off your stairwell or fall off your landing. Like, make sure your balconies are up and they're high enough that people are not going to fall off and you'll be negligent, because you might kill someone and you don't want to kill someone. So again, it's like the sensitivity for life and the sensitivity for other people, and go out of your way and make sure you have a parapet, make sure you have a fence. And you could say, well, that's an easy thing to do. Yeah, it's an easy thing to do, but do it. Do it. And don't just do it because you want to protect somebody's life. Yes, for sure. Do it because of that. But also do it because the Torah tells us to do it. And this is my way of connection. This is my way of bringing light. It's such an easy thing to do. It's such an easy thing to do to shoo away the mother bird. And I bring light into the world when I do that. I'm doing it because God tells me to do it. It's a kind thing to do. It's a good thing to do. It's a win-win-win-win-win situation. So go back to the month of Elul and look at us introspecting and look at us saying, I'm going to work on myself. And here's things I can do. And it's all in this week's Torah portion, 74 things that we can do. I don't know that they're all relevant today, but many, many things that we can do. Honoring our parents, making sure we listen to each other, making sure we listen to ourselves, making sure that we start to fight the battle and God will come and help us, making sure that we don't hate. Let's not hate. So it's really interesting. There's another, very end of this week's Torah portion, we learn about not forgetting Amalek. So we read about Amalek when we came out of Egypt, where we went through the sea split, and we went through the Red Sea, and we came out the other side, and we start journeying towards Mount Sinai, and Amalek comes from behind. So Amalek starts, he and his army attack us from behind. We've just come through, we've experienced all these miracles. The whole world was aware of what happened, of the Jews being rescued, one nation outside of another nation, amazing miracles, the God of the Jewish people bringing one nation out from another, right? And it's mind-blowing. And what does Amalek do? He starts to attack. What arrogance is that? Like, all of these miracles were just perpetrated by the God of the Jewish people against the Egyptians. We had the plagues, we had death of the firstborn, we had the splitting of the sea, and then the sea closing in on the Egyptians, and Amalek was aware of that. And yet he still attacked. So what we learned in this week's Torah portion, this particular last paragraph that we read around Purim time, but we're going to read it again now, this coming Shabbat. And I'll read it to you. Remember, and by the way, in this week's Torah portion, remember is repeated 5 times. The importance of remembering, not just to remember, but to hold it and take it forward with us. Like, this is important for us to know. Moses is saying to the Jewish people, don't forget this. This is really, really important. It's not just I need you to know this, because it's part of your history, but it's something you need to take with you. It's something you need to be aware of. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you were leaving Egypt, that he happened upon you. We're back to this idea of happen. Like, did we happen upon this bird and on top of her nest? And we happen upon the way, like, that he happened upon you on the way, and he struck those of you who were hindmost in the back, all the weaklings at your rear, when you were faint and exhausted, and he did not fear God. It shall be that when Hashem your God gives you rest from all your enemies all around in the land that Hashem your God gives you as an inheritance to possess it, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. You shall not forget. This is Parshat Zachor. This is the reading that we do right before Purim, because Haman, the villain in the Purim story, is a descendant of Amalek, is the personification of evil, and Amalek is about wiping out the Jewish people, is about wiping out God, because we represent God in the world. So wanting to attack us when we're vulnerable, denying that God's there, right? And wanting to annihilate the good. And what he does is it's happenstance. It's along the way. And so the commentators pick up on this happenstance. And one of the ways in which Amalek, the evil, annihilate the Jewish people, annihilate God in the world, the one God, the one source of everything, annihilate that reality and deny that reality. How do we do that? Amalek says, I'm going to do that by introducing doubt. I'm going to put doubt into your minds. I'm going to, I just happened upon you. Things just happen in the world. Coincidences, just things happen. But that is an antithetical teaching to the Jewish teaching, which is that everything happens God's involved in everything. Nothing happens by happenstance. Nothing happens by coincidence. When you bump into somebody, you are meant to bump into that person. When you, like a lot of times people say, oh, it's such a coincidence, da-da-da-da-da. So maybe even just reframe that from the Torah perspective. It would, there was a lovely saying, I think it's my friend Ziggy Laredo in Montreal, who says, is it odd or is it God? I love that. Is it odd or is it God? Coincidence. There's no such thing in coincidence in the Torah way. It's all God orchestrated it. It orchestrated it. So Amalek's going to come along and he's going to say, oh, it's just by chance. I happened upon the people. Nuh-uh. That's not the way you think. But if you start to think that way, if you start to think things just happen and everything's fate and there isn't really a God involved in the world, it's going to take you away. It's going to take you away from God consciousness. And that's exactly... I see Ziggy Laredo's listening, so I'm citing it to you, Ziggy. Is it odd or is it God? Is Amalek is the opposite. Amalek is saying, yes, it's odd. And we're saying, no, it's God. And the more odd you think it is, or the more doubt you have that God's involved, it's going to take you away. And that's not what we want. And the other thing that is being taught that Amalek does is he cools off the water. Like, we're coming out of Egypt. Yes, we're tired. Yes, we've walked through the Red Sea, and it's been so, tiring. I'm sure it's like emotionally tiring and psychologically tiring, and it's rejuvenating, and we're tired, but we're passionate people because God's leading the way. God's leading the way, and God's giving us all the ways we can connect to that reality and to that capacity to lift our lives out of the mundane and make them transcendent and make them infinite and make them eternal. We have the capacity to recognize that our soul, go back to the beginning of this week's Torah portion, our soul that went out to war, that went out into this world, that was living in the world of souls, didn't want to get born, gets put into this body, goes out into this world, is now battling our bodies and our capacity to turn away from God. It's battling that, and God's saying, I'm with you, I'm going to help you. Just turn towards me and I'll help you. Open up the eye of a needle and I'll open it wide for you. But you have to turn and you have to make an effort. And what Amalek is doing is he's cooling off the water, introducing doubt, introducing it's just coincidence, and taking the passion out. Just be blah, just be complacent. It's not a big deal. Nothing really matters. And just kind of live on this kind of low, like uninspired, impassionate reality, right? So obviously that's the extreme, and probably we're all a bit in between. But the goal, again, we're heading towards Rosh Hashanah. What's the goal? The goal is, I have things I'm good at. I have a capacity to objectively evaluate myself and say, I have certain character traits. I have certain ways in the world that are good, and I want to be better at those things. I'm on the journey. I can run a 5-minute mile. I know I can't, but if I can run a 5-minute mile, I can run a 4-minute mile. If I can be kind to the mother bird, I can be kinder to my mother. I can be kinder to my friend. I can be kinder to my enemy. I can help him unload his donkey. I can make sure that I am compassionate. I'm not going to put an ox in I don't know what the equivalent of putting an ox and a donkey are in our day and age. How maybe it would be food for thought. Like, what does that mean today? But I'm going to be honest, right? I'm going to return the lost object. I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to go above and beyond what's expected of me in my society, because I'm not ruled by society. I'm ruled by God, by the Torah, that's taking me to a higher place, right? It's not just so that I don't end up with a fine or in jail. It's because this is the way to live our lives to our fullest, and our most passionate is to link ourselves to this. In this week's Torah portion, we also learn about honesty. We learn about being really honest in our business dealings. So it says about when you have weights and measures, that like a scale. So, you're going to weigh out a certain amount of rice, say, to sell to somebody, and then you have the 5-pound weight on the other side. So don't take the 3-pound weight out of your pocket and put that on and pretend it's a 5-pound weight and give the customer 3 pounds instead of 5 pounds of rice, right? Don't do that. Don't trick people. Don't be corrupt. Don't be fraudulent. Don't be dishonest. And because, let's put it in the positive, don't be fraudulent, don't be corrupt, don't cheat, don't be dishonest. Why? Because that's not going to be you living your highest self, right? You've got to rise up. A couple of weeks ago, I came home from the grocery store and I realized that I had something that I hadn't paid for. And it was a bit of a challenge to know what to do, because I really didn't want to go back to the supermarket. It was a hot day and whatever, COVID, I didn't want to go back into the supermarket. And so I tried to call up the store and pay for it on the phone. They wouldn't take it on the phone. And so the next time I went to the supermarket, I told the checkout lady that I had taken this object and could I please pay for it. And but like that, like, and I felt so good about it. And it was a little thing, and it was a big thing, and it was, what is it, $5, but it was like the principle. And I felt like, and there's another concept that we have in our Jewish tradition, which is that we, as we go down this path of living our higher selves, of being honest, of being people with integrity, the more we do it, the more we become it, right? We'll have another opportunity to do it, and we'll do it. So this week I was in the supermarket and I bought a case of seltzer and I left it at the bottom of the cart, and I got home and I realized I'd left it on the bottom of the cart. So I actually did go back, but it had gone. And then I thought to myself, well, I really hope that somebody who really needed it took that case of seltzer that was needed, and that was, God wanted that person to have that seltzer, right? So reframe it, right? All right, so I lost out on the case of seltzer, and I'll get another case another time, and it's $5 or whatever it is. Again, it was like a reframe and say, oh, actually somebody else has it, and that was my gift to them, and I feel good about that, you know, whoever it was. And so it's about what's in our minds, isn't it? And so here we are, we're being told, live with passion, live with honesty, live with a high bar. As we journey towards Rosh Hashanah, you know, let's keep self-reflecting in a humble way, humility being objective, not humble being I'm so nothing or I'm so great. It's like that middle line of just being honest and being objective and being able to say, well, these are my talents and these are things I want to work on, and do those things without a judgment of good or bad. It's like, I have these talents and I want to use them more, or I want to be better at them, and I can like keep going towards that vision of who I'll be on Rosh Hashanah as I stand there. And again, if you want this 40-day project, please be in touch. I'm happy to send it to you. It's free and it's really interesting. It's really fun if you want to do it, and do it with your friends. Anyway, I highly recommend it. So some other things that we learned about in this week's Torah portion are let's see, what else can I pull out of all the millions of different things that there are to pull out about this week's Torah portion. Yeah, so this is an interesting one. We learn in this week's Torah portion about the Levirate marriage. So the Levirate marriage is a woman married to a man. They have no children, and the man dies, and she is now the brother of the deceased husband is now to marry this one. That's the Levirate marriage, to marry the widow. And the reason, not the reason, again, we don't know the reasons, but one of the ways to understand that is that the deceased husband didn't leave a legacy. He didn't continue his lineage. And so the brother is able to do that for his deceased brother. So there's a kindness aspect. There's a desire, perhaps, on the brother to do an act of kindness to continue the legacy of his brother. And again, perhaps when we talk about Amalek, who attacked the vulnerable, right? The vulnerable at the back of the entourage coming out of Egypt, the people who were like slower, the older people, the children perhaps, who were not walking so fast. Those are the people that Amalek attacked, are the vulnerable. And here we have a law in the Torah, and you know, and now we don't do it. There are ways to get around it, but the idea is that the brother is so kind. So kind. The brother who's deceased, he cannot do anything for himself. He can't put his DNA into the next generation, but the brother can for him, can continue the lineage for him, and can represent him and represent that person who can't do for themselves. And again, it's about us being able to like go outside of ourselves and not be so, you know, so self-centered and about ourselves, and like I'm going to do this for my brother, I'm going to do this for the widow, I'm going to make sure that I'm honest, I'm going to make sure that I take care of animals, I'm going to make sure that I take care of my children, I'm going to make sure that nothing happens by chance, and I'm going to make sure, here's another one that's really awesome, when we talk about returning the lost object. So one of the things that is spoken about in many of the commentators is one of the things that might be lost is our soul. is our soul. And perhaps we're in a generation, and maybe with COVID we're regaining our sense of soul, but it's like, are we lost? Is our soul lost? And how do we bring it home? How do we find its place? How do we re-nurture or refocus ourselves on our souls, not just our souls but other people's souls, like by spending Torah, by lighting candles, by giving gifts, by by learning Torah, whatever share it, like keep spreading that light out, and keep focusing on returning our souls to ourselves, because we're lost in this materialism, in this tangible world, and we want to focus on our souls, especially as we head to Rosh Hashanah. We want to focus on our souls, so let's return our souls to ourselves and maybe help other people have their souls returned to them. So again, another way to think about returning a lost object, not just returning a physical object, but returning a spiritual soul dimension that we have. And I think that's probably all I want to say for today. And I think that this idea of one step, a baby step in that direction, and God will help us, that we'll keep moving in that direction, that by the time we get to Rosh Hashanah, we'll have a vision of what we'd like to be, or what we could be, or what we have the potential to be. And together, that we'll do this together. I think it's also really important that this is our society that we live in. It's not us operating on our own. We're part of the collective, and this is about how we operate together. Being honest, being kind, being compassionate, not forgetting, remembering, knowing who we are, listening to each other, and we'll go forward together as a Jewish people, raising ourselves up in order to bring more light, love, and goodness into the world. So I wish you all a wonderful week.